Good evening, everybody. And I appreciate you staying here late into the evening. And I understand also we are the last act before drinks and dinner, so we're conscious of that. But let me give a quick intro on Lightrock and then introduce Adam and Visby. As Marcus said, my name is Umur Hursever. I'm a partner at Lightrock, and we basically are an impact investment platform which invests in growth companies, disruptive companies that tackle big challenges the globe is facing. And we usually invest $10 to $50 million between that range in growth companies and minority deals, and where our capital is really expansion capital, where the solution is already there and has had some traction. And currently we have two offerings. One is a climate fund, $860 million, and the other one is a growth fund that focuses on financial inclusion, health tech, productivity, and circular economy. And enough about Lightrock, we're here really about Visby, and today it's a great pleasure to host Adam here, who came all the way from California, and talk to you about Visby Medical. Visby Medical is actually groundbreaking because it's a diagnosis and treatment business that puts diagnosis before treatment and is changing the landscape for good by allowing clinicians to test, diagnose, and do treatment at a single visit. But I'm sure Adam will talk more about that. So let's go over to the Q&A, Adam, and right. Maybe we start with, I appreciate you have been a doctor of medicine, doctor of engineering, and a professor at Stanford. So my first question to you is, why did you decide to focus on infections and infectious diseases, which is not necessarily the most glamorous part of medicine when you have oncology or cardiovascular topics?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. That's right. So if you think about the world of medicine, you don't usually think of infections as the most sexy topic to focus on. But here's the interesting thing. The way we practice medicine today, across the board, is we first diagnose someone and then we treat them, right? So think about in the world of cancer. You first find out somebody has cancer, only then do you consider giving them chemotherapy. You're never going to see a doctor telling a patient, look, I'm not sure if you have cancer or not. I'm suspicious, I'm not sure. Why don't we give you some chemo and see how you're doing? It'll be insane to think that. The same thing goes for the usage of insulin. You're not going to give somebody insulin unless you know for sure they have diabetes. You're not going to open somebody up and do an open heart surgery unless you know for sure they have a heart disease. So time and time again, the way medicine is being practiced is we diagnose and then we treat. We diagnose and then we treat, with one exception. There's only one major field of medicine that still works backwards. We're literally treating you first and asking questions later. And that's the world of infectious diseases, or generally if you think about bacteria, viruses, and parasitic infections. And that's about half the time for why somebody goes to see a doctor. You go to see a doctor, it's because you have an infection somewhere in your body. Think about all the places that we humans can get infections: eye infections, ear infections, respiratory infections, skin infections, urinary tract infections, sexually transmitted infections, you name it. Wherever we have a hole in the body, it's an opportunity for a virus or bacteria to go in and infect us. And the crazy thing is, across this entire spectrum of infections, because we don't have the answer for what it is the patient has, we don't know if it's a bacterium or a viral infection. If it is a bacteria, we don't know if it will respond to this antibiotic or that antibiotic. Many bacteria are becoming resistant these days because of a growing issue with overprescription of antibiotics. And so doctors are facing time and time again a situation where they do not know what the patient has. Time is of the essence, so they have to start treating. And it's because of that practice that we felt there's something there. If we can really make the existing technologies more accessible to anyone, anywhere, anytime, where you can still get the same level of accuracy you would get from a big laboratory machine, something the size of a sofa or so, that is running typically in some sort of basement of a hospital. If you could still somehow make it accessible to anyone, anywhere, anytime, that could really be a meaningful opportunity. So that's really why we ended up focusing on infections, actually.
That summarized very well our investment thesis into your company, and it's amazing. Can you also give us a little bit more color on, what was your vision when you started at Visby and how you brought that to fruition and the journey so far?
Yeah, so I guess, like I said, when you think about that moment where you are in front of a doctor, you're feeling sick, or maybe you have a kid that's not feeling well, the doctor needs to make that decision. So what typically happens is the doctor will take a sample, or maybe the nurse, they will send it over to the lab, and then we'll have to wait a few days until the lab result comes back. Now, it's always coming back from a system called PCR. You might have some experience with PCR during the pandemic, invented many, many years ago. It's the gold standard that's being used today to diagnose just about any infection. Like I said, from top to bottom, wherever we have infections in the body, PCR is the gold standard for that. It's a big machine, literally the size of whatever, like this sign that said NOAH here. And so we ask ourselves, is it at all possible to take that really large sofa-sized piece of equipment that costs almost $1 million and make it a lot smaller, a lot faster too, so it doesn't take days or even hours. It's something that takes minutes without losing the accuracy. So that's what we've been working on. It took us 7 years. We've raised a little more than $400 million so far. But 7 years later, we actually did it, and it works really well. In fact, I brought it here to show you. So the device, I don't know if you guys can catch it. And if it's a little hard for you to see, that's kind of the point. It is a really, really small device. So what I'm holding right here is the world's smallest, fastest, and literally the only PCR machine that somebody can hold with a single hand. And trust me, I'm not that fit. So this is an actual PCR machine, even though it doesn't quite look like one. It's certainly a lot smaller. This one in particular, can you actually? Oh yeah, you can actually see it over there. So this is one of our products. We have gotten approved by the FDA for being able to detect different sexually transmitted infections. It doesn't take very long to run this thing. It's not even very hard to run. You collect the sample, you put it here, you close this lid, like so, and you have to run, you have to wait for maybe 28 minutes or so, and you get the answer right here. At the end of the run, this whole thing is done. You can send it back to us, we'll recycle it for you. And what this now allows us is, for the first time, to allow the doctor to see a patient, diagnose the patient, treat the patient, tell the patient what she has or what she doesn't have, and then let the patient go home knowing that she's now well off. And the interesting thing is that we've now done this for this first product for sexually transmitted infections. We've then further expanded it. We now have 6 indications from the FDA across a number of different domains. Respiratory health is another one where we have for influenza and COVID and other products like that. And the other really, I would say, very important thing, if you had any experience with the US healthcare system, you know that financial incentives drives behavior, much more so than any other market I've ever seen in my life. And so really important was for us to make sure that this is in line with what the insurance companies are willing to pay. So in fact, there are existing reimbursement codes that pay whichever doctor it is to run this test. And that's great, because you actually want to, for the most part, many times we complain about the US healthcare system that interests are misaligned and things are not working out very well. At least here, we can go to the doctor and say, hey, instead of sending it over to the lab, why don't you run this test yourself? You make money on this, and your patient is better off. So really, it's a win-win situation.
So as an impact investor, I have to ask the question, Adam. So can you tell us a little bit more about the positive impact your device had on the patient and the patient outcomes already? Yeah,
so maybe a couple of numbers to share. So we're now in more than 500 major hospitals and clinics across the nation. So far only the United States. At some point we'll grow outside of that. And across those 500 sites, this has now become the new standard of care. So whether that's Mayo Clinic and a bunch of other Johns Hopkins, so a bunch of places like this, Dignity Health. This is now the new standard of care. So patients that in the past would go in would be worried that they might have an STD, but really not being sure, and would be told, hey, come back, give us a sample, go home, we'll call you back in about a week or so, we'll let you know. Those patients now leave the clinic knowing what they have and know that they're being treated. So that focus on being able to treat for what you have and not treat for what you don't have is extremely important. That's something that hasn't happened so far. Now, one of the reasons why bacteria are becoming so resistant to antibiotics is we are just way over-treating. We're throwing antibiotics like candy, and that's not good. And it's catching up with us, and it's not heading in a good direction. And so with this, what we're able to do is now reduce overprescription of antibiotics by about 75%. I'll tell you a very short story, but so I'm walking around one of the clinics that's using this. This nurse comes to me and tells me, you kept telling us during the training, you kept telling us that the impact here is being able to find whoever is positive and treat them. Let me tell you about this patient that I had here a week ago. She goes, this person came in, she was worried that her husband is cheating on her. And she said, look, I really want to know if I have an STD or not. She goes, I was able to tell her while she was still in my clinic that she's clean, as in referring to like her being negative for those STDs. She said this patient burst into tears, showed me a picture of her family and said, "You just saved this family." And this nurse told me, you kept overemphasizing how important it is to find the positive patients and treating the positive patients. Don't underestimate the value of telling a patient they're negative and the peace of mind that it gives them. So it's these kinds of stories that, to me and to all of us at the company, really drive us.
I know the time is clicking, but I have one more specific question, Adam, here. So what's next for Visby? And maybe you can combine it also first, how you continue scaling up, and then what's the next phase, the next story?
Yeah, no, it's all about the ability to truly scale up. So we used to make those devices by hand. It took us more than an hour of somebody's time to assemble this. It took us 4.5 years and a full long year with FDA to get it approved. But we now have a fully automated manufacturing line, something the size of maybe half this room or so. And we've moved from about an hour of somebody's time to assemble it to now this automated line producing a device like this every 5 seconds. So that makes a huge, huge difference in our ability to scale, our ability to offer this device at much, much lower prices, which is all about impact ultimately and growth of impact. We've now been able to demonstrate that beyond just telling you if you have an infection, we can even look for the genomic sequence, those mutations that make the bacteria resistant. So we've already demonstrated that with ciprofloxacin, a really important antibiotic. From here, we're moving on to azithromycin, the Z-Pak, so ceftriaxone and others. And that overall will turn into a portfolio of capabilities to be able to tell you what you have and what is it resistant to. So we know how to treat you because in this world, antimicrobial resistance is growing very, very fast. We're in the clinical trials right now to take this device not just to the doctor's office, but also to the home environment. So at the privacy of your own home, at the convenience of your own home, you'll be able to test yourself initially for those STDs, respiratory infections, and over time to any place in the body where we humans can get infections, from eye infections, ear infections, all the way down to urinary tract infections. So that's, we're really just starting, and that's, and it's really exciting.
And I think it's worthwhile to mention you're getting all the right government funding, not just from the US, but from the Israeli government and the UK government as well, to enable this, because actually bringing this test to the home is not taking anything away from somebody. It's going to expand
the market, that's right.
Expand that addressable market and make this available to millions who might not have it or don't feel comfortable to have those discussions.
No, that's a great point.
The access.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, just the STD testing market alone in the United States is 50 million tests a year. Think about the population of the United States, 50 million a year is what it is, and that is a really, really small fraction of the number of people that should be tested but don't, many times because it is a stigmatized condition. So empower the home user to do that. You enable more information there, like antibiotic resistance and so on. We believe that there's an opportunity to really grow this to many hundreds of millions of tests a year, and that's just the United States. That's before we're even talking global, so I agree.
Great. Adam, thank you very much for the fascinating story and the breakthrough work you're doing with you and your team out in California. And I know we're way over time, so thank you very much for your time. And I'm sure if you want to hear more about it, Adam is around, and all the links are on the NOAH website as well.
That's right.
Thank you, and have a good evening.
All right, thanks so much. Thank you.
Umur.